And hello, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday night's Narrative Live. It's good to be with you tonight. Yes, Eric Garland with us tonight. How are you, Eric?
Hey.
Just learning the system. I'm brand new here. Give me a minute.
Brand new. There's no way to practice for a lot of days these days.
These days are all different. You're right about the music being great. I actually went back to the original opening of the show because the other one is good and nice and everything, but I just feel like that the original opening really describes where we're at these days. You know, we're at this real critical moment between this battle against these tyrants, against, ordinary people having to rise up and fight tyranny. And there's no better example of that than what happened today with that leak of the Supreme Court opinion, just an opinion of majority opinion, mind you, but still an opinion about abortion, which indicates to me at least that we are still very much in the middle of that fight between tyrants, kings and thieves, as I think I said in the open, and ordinary people. And we have a lot of fights still to go before we get out of it, because clearly this is not something that they just came up with today. This is something that has been a result of 50 years of work, and it certainly does not represent the opinions of the majority of the people of the United States. So it is an abhorrent and, a decision and an aberration at the same time. I've got so much to talk about this tonight, and they're just ideas. I don't really have a script, or I don't have anything planned around it, but I did want to get your thoughts just to start us off here. Like, what's your sense as you're watching, people starting to gather outside the Supreme Court? There are protests in New York as well tonight. People are not taking this one lying down, even though it's not even a decision yet.
So I have a number of takes on the role of Roe v. Wade and abortion policy. I think this is a Hail Mary pass, as they would say in American football. This is a last-minute move of desperation by certain political elements, because this is the threat that's supposed to hang over American politics, is that, we've made abortion, which is a necessary medical procedure in many cases. My favorite go-to is ectopic pregnancies. If you look at just that, it's like, how can you say there's no exception for this? This is something where a baby takes root in a fallopian tube. It will not live. The mother will not live. It's not up for debate. And yet you have people who've been trained into this political rhetoric of, no, there's no exceptions. And they become single issue voters, and they see it only one way. And that's, a large scale, long-term psychological operation to make them thus. Mm-hmm. And I don't think abortion's about abortion. I think abortion is about taxes. I think that this is there's 8 dudes with all the money who want to overthrow democracy and don't want to pay taxes. And so they systematically want to erode, democratic norms. And they want us to get used to this idea of, there's going to be, like you were saying, Zev, just numerically, this is well decided, and if you looked at a lot of the polling data of the last 50 years, nobody had birth control pills or abortion as this important an issue, or, this was not a 50-50 thing in the country. This is a small subset of people who were instructed to feel this way about this one set of healthcare policy.
I want to underline something you said there, because this is a political move, firstly. This is a move designed to make June an impossible month. It's designed to make the month that we were going to have the Jan 6 hearings take place impossible for those hearings to actually take place, because the noise that is going to emerge over the next 6 weeks until that hearing is going to make everything about Jan 6 disappear. It's going to suddenly just be overtaken by all the noise that we're going to have about the abortion and about Roe v. Wade. It is also a very deliberate move by a group of people who are very seriously dismantling America as we know it. They are not just a political party trying to throw some bad ideas at the wall. This is not just Marjorie Taylor Greene and her friends, hey, let's be stupid and talk about Jewish lasers. No, this is about a group of people around the world who I've called the enemies of democracy, who are deliberately trying to destroy the American state. And they're trying to destroy the system of democracy that rules that state. And they've been doing it very, very carefully for many, many years, longer than we've been aware of it. But we've certainly been aware of it for the last 5 or 6 years. And still, we are unable to stop it because clearly it is still going on. And clearly we are still seeing today the effect of an endless amount of effort and dollars being spent on destroying America. I mean, this is really what it comes down to. It's destroying America. Even at its very face value, this is designed to create so much polarization and so much tension in this country that it will just blow up whatever civility we can have over the next few months heading into the elections. And that's the good side of it. But at its worst, it really is designed to destroy the entire country. It is designed to drag us into a theocracy. It's designed to take away all our rights that have been given to people for the last 50 years. All those incredible improvements that American democracy has given all of us in the world, but especially Americans, all those rights are going to be taken away systematically by this foreign overlords who apparently decided that they've had enough of America for whatever reason. And this is where we're at. This is the point in time. Tonight, we're going to prove some of that as we go through who's actually making this decision and how they got there. It's just, clearly obvious once you go through that. But go ahead, Eric.
Well, so we often make reference to my game theory thread of December the 11th, 2016, because that's when I started talking about Russian intelligence and working both sides of the spectrum. And it's the Russians that often end up as the stars in that piece of writing that I came out with. But what's rarely brought up is I started telling kind of a longer story arc that goes back, 4 or 5 decades. And it really applies to Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society here. When I start talking about the right wing, I start talking about the network of think tanks and media outlets that started in the 70s and 80s. This is a long operation, and it is not entirely a Russian operation by any stretch of the imagination. There's been a political movement from the right to reinvent itself post-Nixon, and that is, they built on Nixon's Southern strategy of going into what was Dixiecrat territory of the older Democratic Party in the South, which, had plenty of unsavory connection to the KKK, the Dixie Mafia, stuff like that, as opposed to, other sources of power. But in any event, the Republicans dipped down into that territory that they had not won in since the Civil War. And they started having connections to these these reactionary evangelical pastors that they would have absolutely never dealt with before. And not only did they accept them back in and the money they'd bring, they started weaving some of their ideas into these networks of think tanks. And some of those think tanks have become deeply compromised and serious tools of foreign powers. But in any event, several of these think tank organizations have had, for their ultimate end, the overthrow of the American government. And that's different than any left-wing organization that we've had. And we've had straight up, if you go back 50, 60 years or 70 years or whatnot, and you look at Rosa Parks, for example, great civil rights icon, if I'm not mistaken, member of the Communist Party of the United States. A lot of
really, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
They're out of the Communist Party in the United States, based out of Alabama. Interesting, right? That the Soviet-aligned communists picked the South to base themselves in. And there's connections to the Black Liberation Movement. And, because you think about provocatia and Russian political destabilization and whatnot, it's something they'd want to have a hand on in terms of a lever. So I'm from Vermont, our friend Bernie Sanders there, he did his honeymoon in Russia, the famous footage of him drinking vodka in his T-shirts with Peter Clavel and his bride, Peter Clavel, ends up being the second mayor of Burlington after Bernie. I mean, there's some affinity there, but there's a big difference between Chris Hayes. We can't live in a country with the 3% over the 2%, have the 1%.
That's great. I haven't seen you do the impersonation of Chris Hayes, but well done. That's good.
No, that's Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
We can't live in a country where the banks own 50% of everything that is 2%.
Okay.
He's not trying, but Bernie, and he's not always been my favorite, but Bernie never wanted to replace the system of government. I never heard that. And he's a pretty radical dude. I think once upon a time, he wanted to take back some General Electric factory and make it the people's schools, like in 1969 or whatnot. But he didn't, he didn't.
Neither did Joe Biden, and look at that. That's what they say that he's trying to do as well. So,
yeah. In that same time period, they made Joe Biden, Delaware senior, the senator of Delaware, representing chemical companies and whatnot. So they're not very. I think, and actually, that's a good point. You take those two guys, who the folks on the political right in the United States would go, "Oh, they're both radicals." But if you looked at those two men in 1971, who were both politically active, they had nothing to do with each other, and neither one of them wanted to overthrow the U.S. government. And so getting back to Leonard Leo and those cats, the Federalist Society and this network of think tanks and very sneaky ideas, Grover Norquist, I want government so small that we can drown it in a bathtub, which is this violent imagery. And then you take over the NRA. You take the NRA from a hunting and rifle sporting association, because there is a certain lifestyle that goes along with hunting for your own food that probably shouldn't be lost to American frontiersmen. And then, but you turn that into, and everyone should have a submachine gun. And you're basically a subset of the Sinaloa cartel, guns trafficking. That gets transformed. And then you start, the biggest thing I was pointing out in my game theory thread was that you're creating an alternate universe. And it's not about having an alternative opinion. You have alternative facts. And then Kellyanne Conway stole that from me 2 weeks later.
She took your line.
She took my line. Then Randy Rainbow made a song out of it, which was way more awesome. So that made it all.
He did not make a song about athletic. He did. You're right. He did. He absolutely did. Oh, we're going to get him on the show.
Actually, facts. They're not facts. We're
going to get him on the show because he's going to sing it with him. It's a good idea.
He's got a book to push. Maybe he'll do it. I know,
that's why I think he might come on. Hey, I got to fill in a commercial break. But what you're saying here is really important. You're talking about these very important fundamental movements to try and distort reality for Americans. And it's working. It's working. Half of America believes in things that the other half does not believe in. And it's just the truth right now.
And it's not the half. That's the thing. It's not half. In some cases, it's 11%.
Yeah. But it's allowed.
And for I don't want to pay any taxes at all ever, you can pay all the taxes. That's like 8 dudes.
Well, it's more than 8 dudes. I'm going to challenge you on more than 8 dudes because it's a much bigger network. And I think we have to start realizing this is not just 8 dudes. There are nation states involved. There's religious organizations involved. There are political parties involved. There are billions and billions of dollars involved. If it was just 8 dudes, you, me, and 6 of your friends would be able to change the country around. But it isn't. It's a large, huge undertaking. We'll get into all of that just on the other side of this. Hey, it's becoming more and more expensive to buy groceries. And if you, like me, are trying to get all the nutrients and vitamins you need while still balancing your budget, it's become nearly impossible to get all the nutrients you need from food alone, especially on a budget. That's why I did the 30-day Athletic Greens Challenge in April. The plan was simple. Take the AG1 supplement throughout April and track any increases in energy levels, overall well-being, and vitality. And if my immune system felt boosted. I did it throughout April, and I have to say, I feel terrific every day taking it. I still take it every day after the 30-day challenge was over. And the biggest fear that people have about green drinks is the taste. And I have to tell you that even taking it daily, drinking this drink every day, the drink tastes great every time. It's refreshing and tastes a little bit like a tropical drink. AG1 is engineered to provide all the right nutrients at just the right time. Whether you want increased energy or improved muscle recovery, they've got it covered. And because they care about your wallets too, AG1 will only cost you around $3 a day. To make it easy for you, Athletic Greens is also going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/narrative. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/narrative. That's the way we spell narrative, NARATIV, to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And remember to go visit that site if you want all those free goodies attached to your order. That's athleticgreens.com/narrative, NARATIV. All right, we're back live with Eric Garland and me, Zev Shalev. We're talking about the United States of Leonard Leo. I was, sort of being a little coy in my poster tonight, but this guy, Leonard Leo, most people do not know who Leonard Leo is. He's a very powerful man who happens to be in charge of a lot of important judicial decisions in this country, specifically around the appointments of who is going to sit on the Supreme Court of the United States of America. He's a funny-looking dude. This is one you might appreciate. This is him. Do you know much about Mr. Leo over here?
I know we should get that suit let out a little bit. Just a tailor or something. The blue is nice and shiny. Yeah, this guy.
Yeah. This guy. So, we have a very good Supreme Court, a very good history of having a very good balanced Supreme Court. Up until recently.
Hold on. Other than the Dred Scott decision, and it's been improved over time.
They've gotten better over time, and up until recently, they were doing quite well. This is the current makeup of the Supreme Court of the United States. It will change, of course, because we have a new justice who will be sworn in, but this is the current makeup. You can see quite readily here that there is a lot of Trump and a lot of Bush on the wall here. There's two Obamas and two Clintons. One Clinton. So, this is why we have a skewed system, is because a skewed judgment here, or at least a skewed opinion here, is because under Trump, we had 3 justices nominated and confirmed to the Supreme Court. And that is remarkable, considering Donald Trump himself was not, in my opinion, the rightful winner of the 2016 elections. And in all likelihood, should never been able to give any of these opinions or any of these decisions because he was ultimately supported by an enemy state or an adversary in Russia. And I think it's been proven well beyond reasonable doubt that he had Russian supporters, that he had Russian contacts. He himself was a Russian asset. I think that was all pretty much proven. So the idea that that person can be allowed to make these nominations and appointments to the Supreme Court, considering he has basically acted as an agent for a foreign country during that period of time, is striking beyond belief.
That last part, that's going to be a real point of discussion here. I think, if given how much he was in the service of multiple hostile foreign states, including right up to the end, although Russia does, in fact, feature largely. There was an Office of the Inspector General report today that confirmed what the whistleblower from the DHS intelligence agency told us in September 2020, which is that one of his last acts, in case you had some questions about Trump and Russia, that they ordered the only domestic intelligence product producing agency, DHS, is the only agency that can do intel products and give it to members of law enforcement and state governments and stuff like that. They said, do not mention Russia and do not mention the right-wing paramilitaries because it makes Trump look bad. So they're part of the coup. That came out in an OIG report today about Chad Wolf. It is one of the most nasty scandals in intelligence and government history. And that was today. And it was for Russia. So yeah, if this was a bunch of people acting for China, Russia,
Saudi Arabia, Israel, whoever, the list goes on.
Sinaloa cartel. Yeah. Then who are these 3 up in the back there? Gorsuch there, 2017. It's ironic because that should have been Merrick Garland. The only reason it's not is because the Republicans got the party started early on discarding the Constitution whenever the goddamn hell they feel like they can or want to. And
that was an illegal move there, right there. And that was even before Donald Trump was in there. So, it's the GOP for sure. And it's also Donald Trump and illegal presidency that landed up with an illegal attempted coup, I should remind everybody, which was designed to lead up to this same Supreme Court throwing out the election results because they had stacked the court with people that they knew were loyal to them.
So you hang that on Mitch McConnell. He never gets away from this. And he never goes, well, I think I might have been. Nope. This is his coup d'etat as well.
Yeah, for sure it is. So, let's look at these 3 because they're 3 unique individuals. They each deserve their own moment in the spotlight here. But I should mention that each of them, and the reason why Donald Trump was able to get away with appointing them to the court is because Leonard Leo and his Federalist Society had approved them. That his whole thing was, I'm not even doing the Supreme Court picking. I'm just going to pick anyone the Federalist Society tells me to pick because they're trustworthy, right? Everyone knows the Federalist Society. Well, you add the Federalist Society to an in the hands of the Russian, China, Saudi Arabia, and Israeli government president, and who knows what decisions you get. In fact, you get these decisions. You get people like Kavanaugh, you get Gorsuch, and you get Amy Coney Barrett. And these are three people that are outside of the norm. I mean, Gorsuch maybe not, but I'll explain why I think he is. Outside of the norm of normal politics, of where mainstream politics is in America. I mean, surely, Amy Coney Barrett is, just her background shouldn't be disqualifying, but it looks unusual, the fact that she has sort of this cult upbringing, that she, that her marriage is sort of governed under a different set of rules than the traditional rules of marriage in the world, that it's governed by some sort of religious devotion to her husband, but that means that she has to follow everything he says. I mean, that's unusual for a Supreme Court justice, but let's say we don't have to look at those things, and there's other reasons maybe she shouldn't have been there. But Gorsuch and Kavanaugh are directly tied to the same group of people that gave us Donald Trump. And I think that's important. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this about Gorsuch, but his history, and particularly his mother's history at the EPA, is really fascinating. Are you aware very much about what Gorsuch's mom was doing at the EPA?
I know.
You do, because I'm going to tell you right now, because you don't know.
Well, good. We'll learn something.
So this is a recent little bit of learning that I came across. This is Anne M. Gorsuch, was an attorney, an American attorney and politician between 1981 and 1983. So she served under President Ronald Reagan as the first female administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, which sounds like a nice, noble thing to do. But like the Trump administration, under Reagan, the EPA, and under Gorsuch's command, decided they wanted to destroy the EPA from within.
Yeah.
So she was one of those people who liked to gut the enforcement, who wanted to collapse all the regulations, who wanted to make it all just impossible for people to actually protect the environment. And one of her heads of the EPA, one of her deputies there at least, I think Rita Marie Lavelle, landed up becoming the figure that got accused for this, was the scapegoat for this, and was ultimately faced criminal charges in that she was perjured herself in testimony. But it's interesting that amongst the other things that they did was they raided the agency's super fund, which is a $1.6 billion fund designed to clean the air and to clean hazardous waste material.
Sure.
They raided to enormous extent. They also, by the way, and this is very, very crucial, do you know the Coors company, the beer company that makes...
Adolphus Coors, he's part of that. Go on.
Yeah, so, the Coors people were not always just beer people. They used to be mining people. And, by everyone's account, I didn't know this until recently, we're also like part of that same sort of mining mafia that existed in the United States, along with the Koch family and other families like that. So they're not dissimilar from the Koch family. And when Gorsuch, took over the agency, it became clear to some that she intended to turn typical agency regulations and make them really impossible to follow. In her tenure, she successfully reduced the number of cases filed against alleged polluters and approved the spraying of pesticides, which were of the very restricted use variety. She also cut the amount of employees in the agency and hired lobbyists to join the agency. Burford was cited for contempt of Congress and resigned following a scandal. It wasn't only her anti-regulation desires that caused a concern for the public and some legislators. It was her refusal to submit documents after public and congressional outcry. In 1982, Congress accused the EPA of mishandling a $1.6 billion toxic waste fund and demanded the proper records from her. Burford refused to release the documents to the body and in return was cited for being contempt. Eventually, the EPA turned over the documents after Reagan's White House dropped its claim that the information was unable to be subpoenaed because they were part of executive privilege. Once the White House quit pursuing the claim, Burford resigned from her role with the EPA. She said it was getting to the point where she couldn't do her job anymore. She added that she left the post because she believed that she had become the issue, saying that it's hard to lead a normal life when there are people camped in front of your yard. Now, she's the mother. Her son may not be the same person. Her son might be a, very legitimate, clean person, but he's not. He's also comes from the same group of people. Like, his support from Leonard Leo is the reason Gorsuch is on the Supreme Court. And Leonard Leo is tied to the Koch family very, very directly. He's also tied to the Federalist Society we mentioned before, and also to the Council for National Policy, that extreme right-wing group that is trying to turn America into theocracy. So people are allowed to have political affiliations. Of course they are. But when you're looking at a intentional campaign to install Supreme Court justices that will go do the bidding of the mafia families, of the big mining families, of the big dons in America, now you're talking about corruption.
Sure. I mean, look, the Koch brothers, there comes from, among other activities, building fossil fuel plants for Hitler and Stalin. And their connections to Russia go back all the way. They're foreign agents on U.S. soil that have U.S. passports. Mm-hmm. They could have changed that attitude at any time, but clearly didn't.
And Leonard Leo is their man. I mean, there's one example I was able to find. It's a little hard to find how he's connected to them, but he is absolutely connected to them. And the best example is at George Mason University, where, he is responsible for all the admissions to the law school over there. And Leo is, according to this article in Slate, is friends with David and Charles Koch, and they've both donated generously to his organization. But Leo coordinated the donation of $10 million from the Charles Koch and $20 million from an anonymous donor to rename the George Mason University Law School after Justice Scalia.
Antonin Scalia, yeah.
That anonymous donor was later revealed to be the BH Fund, a tax-exempt group of which Leo is president. So he's basically, he's just basically the front man for them in a lot of ways. And he's an honorary Koch brother. Yeah. Sort of like the Bee Gees or something. Or the Koch brother that really needs to have that suit let out. I mean, he really does. That suit's not good for him. It's good.
I mean, you can do a lot with, we're big guys.
This is not although my mind maps do look a little like this. This is someone online that posted all these connections that he has. Leonard Leo is not just Leonard Leo. Leonard Leo is all these other people, all these other organizations, the Federalist Society, the Council for National Policy we mentioned before, all these other organizations that are tax-exempt organizations that promote different justices. It's a large-scale movement. And since the 1970s, they have been building up an attempt to take over the Supreme Court. And now here they are. They've taken over the Supreme Court. They have 5 justices that are leaning right or very, very right. And they can do things that they've always wanted to do, like get rid of abortion. It has been Leonard Leo's number one aim in life for the last 40 years, I think, to get rid of abortion, to get rid of Roe versus Wade in America. And now he's been able to do that. It appears that he's been able to do that. Except there's a big question mark around why the leak, who the leak. Everyone's talking about, should we talk about the opinion itself or should we talk about the leak itself? Both are very important. And, what do you think? Do you have any theories on how the leak happened on this opinion?
Yeah, I think they were about to have to discuss the fact that Bibi Netanyahu has been discovered to be running cover for the Sinaloa cartel doing cocaine and human trafficking. That sort of came out this weekend. The wheels are coming off the fun bus for these guys. And this is something that everyone's going to talk about because you're talking about weaponization of women's healthcare is going to disturb every woman, much like in Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing. It was flagrantly traumatizing to every woman. It's every woman who's ever been to a party and been aggressed, much like, it's like Trump is like everybody's touchy uncle or gross, authority figure that abused a woman for the most part. This is every abuser at a party, or that's how the spectacle was made. And then the greatest nightmare is these guys are going to pass, hideous healthcare policies and go even crazier about what they expect women are allowed to do with their bodies. I mean, so all this is, by the way, and you paralyze half the electorate. Mm-hmm. Like almost every woman I talked to today is pretty miserable about this. And it's hard to keep, your mind on anything else. So I think it's a large psychological terrorism operation.
I agree. It's not only paralyzing, it's also weaponizing the rest. I mean, So now they're going to have all these protests. We're going to have these huge protests that are just going to, they'll take over the narrative of everything for the next few weeks. And, hopefully they'll stay peaceful and hopefully things will be okay. But, you can just see how here we are yet again in the summer of, 2020, when it was all Black Lives Matter. And now it's going to be abortion.
Yes.
And it's going to be the same. Let's build up so much hysteria and craziness. So, we just can't function as a society. And then maybe, the good Republicans will restore order and law and order in our society, come November in the elections. It's an election ploy amongst many other things. I also think it was not going to get through. I think this this opinion declaring that 5 of them had signed on to this opinion is not the reality of what was going on. To me, it seems like Justice Roberts had found a voice amongst those 5 that was going to work on a different opinion, and that they were going to be able to at least come up with some sort of median path. That voice may have been this man you see on our screen here, Mr. Kavanaugh. And maybe his decision to remove himself from that original pack of 5 is the reason we might have seen that opinion released. That's one scenario that I think is worth pointing out, because I think it has some sort of legitimacy around it. I've not confirmed it 100%, but it sure sounds like a good theory. The other theory is that, BuzzFeed is not. Do you remember when BuzzFeed was used as a vehicle for releasing a document that might disrupt any elections? Because I can't think of any.
Hold on, did BuzzFeed release this?
Yeah, it's Politico. It's Politico. Sorry, it's Politico. It's Politico. I'm sorry. But it reminds me a lot of it being like BuzzFeed. Sorry, I'm sorry. I apologize. The two of them sort of merge in my political landscape a little bit. But, it reminds me of that whole scenario of the Steele dossier being released in 2016 to disrupt the elections. This has the same feel to me, that we've got Politico, coming out with this shocking, like absolutely out of left field. Where did this come from? No one's ever done this in the history of all of the Supreme Court before. Here's this leak. Like Steele dossier was like that. It was like, where did this leak come from? It was bizarre. You'd never seen anything like it. This is the same kind of leak.
Now, it's different than the Steele dossier in that this is not like 3 guys, in Cleveland who've come up with, they're going to make something that looks sort of like a Supreme Court decision. This looks like a draft. They're like, nope, that's authentic. So that makes it different than the Steele dossier. Yeah. But it's like, wait a minute, you guys weren't done with this thing yet? Who made the decision to release that? Because it's not finished. What purpose is that other than to drive the narrative away from the fact that if we were going to say the words Supreme Court this week, it should have been, God, do you think Clarence Thomas's office is going to be raided by the FBI, or his house has been raided by the FBI as the January 6th DOJ investigations go on? Are the marshals, flipping over their breakfast cereal looking for stuff? That's what we would have been talking about.
100%.
And the last week, Jamie Raskin is completely clear in his verbiage. He's like, this is the worst thing ever. Everything's going to blow up. Strap in.
Yeah.
Traitors are going down. And last week we had the first, now we have the second guilty plea to the major obstruction of a government process. I think it's 18 U.S. Code 1512. That's like another bad one. It's like a 20-year charge from the Jan 6 people. And they're not even the major conspirators. This is like a guy throwing a sign or a spear. I'm forgetting all the details, but he pleaded out to a nasty charge. Another judge said, you know what? I may have been too lenient in my sentencing. I'm going to reconsider that of these people earlier on. He was saying, wow, the more I learned from these other cases about what they were up to, because, courts ideally have to function on facts and not feelings, right? Facts and the law, and then you apply. And this is why you have something enormous like this. As a court, you can only go so far with the facts you have. But since all these people work together, now that the facts are coming out about just what was involved, things like, there may have been coordination from the White House. There may have been coordination like to Ginny Thomas's best friend and whatnot. Now you have the judges going, hey, you know what? I'm going to start handing out a bunch more 20 to 40 year prison sentences. That was where we were like on Friday. It's Tuesday. Like you wake up Tuesday morning and like, okay, what's going to happen here? And then boom, they pull the final ripcord on this one is like, go get the Roe v. Wade draft thingy and fling it out at some
especially if it was going to be useless to them. If they knew already that in June, the decision was not going to be the same as this opinion because Kavanaugh had already shifted, or one of the others had already shifted into a Roberts sort of middle ground, then this decision, this opinion becomes kind of moot. And so why not use it in this particular space, in this particular time, to disrupt 2 months of political conversation around January the 6th and turn it into conversation about abortion?
Zev, I am not a journalist.
Yeah.
I'm an intel analyst. There are different professions. You're a journalist.
Yeah.
In some ways, this is where they really depart about when you're going to take a responsibility to the public. And we may be, I got plenty of opinions about BuzzFeed for what they did. So is what Politico did here today running this before it was authenticated by the court itself? Is that normal journalistic?
They said they had authenticated it, and we sort of all took their word for it over the last 24 hours. I have real questions about why they chose to run it. I don't think it's a complete story. I think what we're seeing is an accurate document, a document that comes out of the Supreme Court, no doubt, but is it a complete telling of what's going on? Not at all. It's the kind of thing that should spark an investigation, not the kind of thing that should result in the publication of something. And, you get thrown things all the time that look legit and might be legit and all these other things. Yes, but it doesn't mean that you should be utilized as a vehicle for political action, which is what I think Politico was used here for. Whichever side decided to deploy this, or whoever decided to deploy this into the public space, Politico was being used by them, and they did not apply the normal, I think, sort of journalistic caution around things that you want to apply to these things to say, hey, are we just being used? And it doesn't help that Politico was just recently bought by, I think, a German company.
Axel Springer.
Yeah, yep. Axel Springer. So that certainly doesn't help the look of this whole thing because, BuzzFeed and Politico together, because I question their political existence. I question why they exist journalistically, because it does seem to be as a political arm of some other state or organization or something that we can't see or identify. And that, to me, is what this was. It was a political act, and Politico let itself be used. And all these congratulations going around for this guy's big scoop. It was not really, he didn't do that very much. Something probably landed on his lap. And in fact, what happened was Politico was being used by the people who put this out today. It's not that the opinion isn't what it says it is. It's in that opinion. It absolutely is what it is. But they're not telling the full context of that story and not explaining the full events, as far as I can see.
Then that's more media failure here, because really, you guys can all go to hell with your scoops. I mean, it's not like I've done my job, 48% of the way, and I'm going to fling this out and have a horrible effect on, the democratic discussion. Guess what? That's not a scoop. That's a failure. Congratulations.
I think you need to be able to explain it. This is the kind of story you just don't put out there without saying, hey, we did some investigating and this is what was going on. Roberts was doing this and maybe Kavanaugh was going to flip and, you need to explain all that stuff. Then you can put it out. But just put it out there as, hey, this is going to be the decision in June. When I think clearly the subtext is that this is not going to be the decision in June. This is going to be the decision up until June. We'll see what happens. So,
look, was the investigation of foreign powers completely crazy by the FBI? Here's something that is not one of their products. Yes. So the Steele dossier.
Yes,
exactly. Has the entire intelligence community failed? Like, what?
Yeah.
Who's driving this? And it turns out there's a bunch of foreign hands in there. Interesting.
Well, that's the thing that you keep coming back to with all of these things. And, it's not just domestic politicians that are messing around with things. It's actually big time organizations. I mean, I don't know very much about the Knights of Malta. Do you know very much about the Knights of Malta?
Oh, yeah, but sure.
I don't know. I mean, if you look them up, they sound like a crazy thing. I mean, this is from the Daily Beast, which said, I know that the Knights of Malta keep coming up in conversations around what's going on in the United States. Leo is a member of the secretive, extremely conservative Knights of Malta, a Catholic order founded in the 12th century that functions as a quasi-independent sovereign nation. You know that? I don't know. With its own diplomatic corps, separate from the Vatican, United Nations status, and a tremendous amount of money and land. The Knights, which recently have tussled with Pope Francis and resisted his calls for reform, take their own set of vows, as monks do. On the surface, the primary work of the order is humanitarian work around the globe, but it is also home to the noted Catholic conservatives, including Cardinal Raymond Leo Burke, a frequent foe of the reformist Pope. Leonard's faith is a paramount to him. When he traveled, staff members had to find him a church near where he was staying so he could say and mass every day and attend mass every day. To be sure, none of this is to repeat the odious claim of anti-Catholicism, of papist conspiracies and dual loyalty, but Leo has spent a career shaping the federal judiciary to reflect rigid conservative religious dogmas. Those include the notions that human life begins at conception and that homosexuality is immoral. The reason is that the moral natural law is a part of the fabric of the universe of laws of nature, and it trumps any secular law that humans or legislatures might dream up, as developed by St. Thomas Aquinas and a millennium of subsequent philosophers. Everything has a natural function and its natural misuse and its unnatural misuse. Food is for nourishment, not gustatory delight, and sex is for procreation, not pleasure. Sensual enjoyment is luxury. You get the idea. Sinful diversion is not what it's all about. It's all about procreation, reproduction, natural law, natural things.
Yeah, unless it's between a priest and an 11-year-old boy.
That's a good point. You make it very. But this Knights of Malta, they show up again and again. Or as we've been investigating all of Trump Russia and everything that landed up being Trump Russia, people like Eric Prince is a Knight of Malta, for example. And so you start finding a lot of people in the firmament of the Trump mafia universe that seem to belong to the Knights of Malta. And that's troubling, that there is these deeply powerful old religious organizations that might be at the root of a lot of the change that has been going on in America, and maybe have the long vision and the resources to do something like what they've done to SCOTUS over 50 years by installing a bunch of extremist justices in an American Supreme Court.
There's a local member of the Knights of Malta here. Well, she's passed on, but Phyllis Schlafly, the Reagan-era anti-feminist, really she's from a very wealthy St. Louis family. And when she died, it's funny, I love the local media here that like something huge will walk by, they'll pay absolutely no mind to it. The Knights of Malta eulogized her. And so
I remember actually there's a photo of pallbearers from the Knights of Malta that laid her to rest. So yeah,
that's right. And so you've got the Schlafly Eagle Forum. The guy who runs that, Ed Martin, was part of the Jan 6th, organizing the January 6th coup d'etat. Yeah. He used to be the head of the GOP here in Missouri. And that's where guys like Mike Flynn would come, and I believe Steve Bannon as well would come here to the Schlafly's Eagle Forum. And that's the Knights of Malta. And spare me your Dan Brown cosplay, the Da Vinci Code cosplay here of, this is a religious thing. This is not about faith. This is about power. This is about covert money and covert intelligence. This is an organization of foreign influence.
Yeah, so Schlafly was the one who, gave Flynn that award to, it was 2019 maybe, I don't know, maybe it was 2020, but that giant award, and that's where we saw that dinner with him and all these QAnon I don't know what you want to call them, collaborators,
traitors.
Yeah, you could call them that too. She's honored this guy. And again, the Knights of Malta are a thread throughout his history too. And it's not a coincidence. I think you gotta assume that these very moneyed, wealthy people are doing something that they maybe feel entitled to do, but that they're doing something very aggressive and deliberately to disrupt America. This is not America at its norm. We're not experiencing America at its norm. We're experiencing America heavily attacked on all sides for many, many years by different countries and organizations, which I've always lumped into this notion of the enemies of democracy.
So, the Garland family got here pre-Pilgrim. My ancestor, Peter the Mariner Garland, helped chart the seas around New Hampshire and Maine and Massachusetts, which, then my people landed and whatnot. Anyhow, I got the pay stubs of my grandfathers who fought in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And look, it's not to say they were great folks necessarily, or that this country was where it needed to be or had all the values that we had dreamed up for it when the full nation kicked on in the late 1700s. But the notion of, even if it was just for a few landowning white dudes, the notion of being free of these imperial mystical organizations, that was paramount. I mean, even if they themselves, may have owned slaves or they themselves were elitist in other ways, they were like, okay, maybe that's us, and we'd like the nation to get better. But they definitely wanted to cast off the Catholic Church. They wanted to cast off the notion of primogeniture and divine right of kings. The founding fathers, had a really sketchy moral history, all of them. But the one thing that they were really, really big on was spare us your sky friend bullshit and get to work. That this is a secular nation that is a nation of laws, not men, and all this bullshit with titles and secret. I mean, they had the Masons, but the Masons is of course, a labor union. They were the ones building the cathedrals back in the day, and so they had their systems of hand signals and whatnot. Was because they were like the inventors of the retirement system and like basically health insurance. That if you were a Mason, you could get health care and you could stay at their series of inns. Anyhow, so they sometimes pin that on George Washington. They had their secret societies too, but it was different, and it may have been flipped and subverted since then, but it's not the same thing. If you read their writing from the time that this country was founded, they hated the febrile religiosity of the old world. Remember, they were only 100 so years of everybody murdering each other in the street over the schism in the Christian church. Witch burning was not that far off. We dabbled with it a little bit in Massachusetts. There was, the founding fathers, when they're like, all right, let's do this and let's write the documents that we are still basing this country on, that this Supreme Court takeover. That's what this is. This is dragging this shit back before 1776.
Right. It is normal. It's not natural. Talk about natural law. America has progressed so much since that time. People's rights have progressed so much. Our privacy rights have progressed so much. And they are dragging us back to a religious colonial era, which is not normal. I mean, it's not where we are. America is not
medieval. It's not even colonial. Yeah. It's medieval.
Yeah.
This is like some of the shit in St. Louis here where we're going to, we don't need a warrant to search your house or we'll throw you in jail and you'll die and you can't sue us. That's pre-Magna Carta. So we're talking about dragging this place back 900 years. Pre-Magna Carta, pre-habeas corpus.
Yeah. You're talking about things like abortion and gay rights. You're talking about the state interfering in your personal private life, your personal private decisions about how you want to spend your life, how you want to govern your own body, how you want to do your own things, which is quintessentially American. And now this Republican Party, which supposedly is libertarian, I mean, give me a break. These guys are in favor of the Supreme Court interfering in a woman's right to choose what to do with her body. I mean, it's the most anti-libertarian thing you've ever heard of. It's absolutely nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. And it's just another piece of evidence that you've got there that the GOP, maybe it's not itself, or it's become something that's just antithesis or antithetical to democracy. It just doesn't belong in democracy.
So, it's also anti-fact, anti-science, anti-reason. And that's why I dragged this back 800 years. Like, do you know how old the grand jury system is?
No, how old is the grand jury system?
It's about 800 years old. Wow. The notion that, that you could be accused of a crime of some sort, like if it was a major and heinous crime, they were trying to, several hundred years old, where there needed to be courts aside from the ecclesiastical, just some religious figure saying he's committed a heresy. They're like, no. We needed a group of people from the community to sit in and hear about the charges before we lay those out.
To me,
right? Because otherwise, you have a small group of people with their extreme religious beliefs coming up with some bullshit and then changing your life, or, laying hands on your body or killing you or something like that. Boy, that'd be terrible. We're talking about over 500 years of legal history there. And this group of miscreants wants us back to the dark ages.
Yep. And why? They want it because they want to destroy America. America is a great example of what democracy can deliver. It's a great example of how you can take people from different parts of the world and they will work together based on the fact that they can all ascribe to a single idea, to a single notion. And it's worked. It's worked so well that America has landed up leading the world for well over a century, but longer than that, of course. And it's certainly in the last century that there was the American century, that towards the end of it, people started saying this is the end of the American century and started writing off America. And I don't think this is the end of America, and no one should allow these foreign invaders say that it is the end of America, because in fact, America is the system that has led the world in the last 100 years. And there is no better system out there that we've seen. And it continues to be a shining light for everybody else in the world. And we continue to be, even through these enormous difficulties, a place that can handle change, can handle all the commotion we've had in our society and still hold on to rule of law. It is remarkable that all of that has happened in the last 5 years, considering what we've been through. And this should not be a reason, today's opinion, just an opinion, should not be a reason that we derail where we were going. As far as I'm concerned, January the 6th remains key in understanding what's going on. And this opinion should not derail anyone's attention in terms of understanding what happened on that day. We need to know what happened on that day. And those people need to go to jail if they committed crimes that are against the Constitution of this country. That's the rule of law. That is how we've been around all our lives. And that is what needs to continue. So don't stop paying attention to January the 6th. Don't let these guys swamp our world with abortion talk for the next 6 weeks when it's not in fact what's going to be the case. And in fact, I would argue the Supreme Court should actually delay the whole abortion decision until after the elections anyhow, so that people can speak and decide who they want, whether they want abortion to be part of the legislative process next season. It's up to the people if they want abortion or not. They can vote in the election. They can decide which party they want to vote for. Do they want to vote for the anti-abortion party, or do they want to vote for the pro-abortion party? It's easy. They let them decide. Then the justices can opine on what happened. But right now, there's too much around this whole decision that makes it impossible for anyone to think that it's going to be clean or valid or anything. So, let's hold off until after the elections.
Yes, and it's as I hope John Roberts hears this. Sir, your institution here has just interfered with the other two branches of American government here. That was something, I'm sorry, your operational security isn't very good, but somebody gave this German-owned media outlet some draft here. So, it's going to be febrile because it's such the most important topic that court's been considering, given all these horrible things that these people want to do with it. So clearly, while we're at this very sensitive juncture, you guys can't make that decision. So just push that off. And Justice Roberts, please announce that you're not going to be making that decision, because we have a lot of things to get through, such as the January 6 hearings.
And he just launched an investigation. He just today launched an investigation into this. Surely we're not going to know the results of that investigation by June, knowing the way things work at the Supreme Court. It's going to take a little time for them to figure out who's exactly responsible for this leak. So June seems to be a non-starter anyhow. It's a non-starter. Yeah. So push it back till November or December or whenever it is you want to do it. But it should not happen before the people have a chance to speak about whether they want abortion or not. I mean, that really is...
Or before we know whether Clarence Thomas was actually in the Presidential Emergency Operations Center on January 6th.
Right. Or whether Ginny Thomas, his wife, was in the Operations Center that day. Or,
For example, all
those kinds of things. You want to know. We need to know. And frankly, until then, the Supreme Court has gotten very little teeth. They sort of have lost credibility in a lot of it, I think, throughout all of this.
It would be a shame if they kept up with this. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. Well, that was a good show. Thank you, Eric. All made up on the fly a little bit here, but it was good to hang out with you and good to see you again. And always your opinions are brilliant and interesting. Everyone should actually check out your game theory thread. Will you repost it?
I will. I think it's held up pretty well. And the stuff with, the network of alternative facts, that's where this is going. Yeah. That's where these guys have been driving it. And also, since you've brought this up, you keep talking about America being the system. What I wrapped that thread up in was America is no longer a place, it's an idea. And I was scared that afternoon that we were going to lose it. And that if we did, that the idea wouldn't die. Because, we can take steps back and they can take steps forward in Europe. I mean, Europe went so far in the Enlightenment, and then even this slave-owning country over here picked up those ideas from John Locke and Voltaire and whatnot and added it to the mix around here. And then we overthrew the British Empire and we started our own flawed country and advanced. And then the French got inspired by that. And they're like, wait a minute, You don't have to put up with abusive totalitarianism. I think I'll tear the heads off these gendarmes at the Bastille. And then they go through their things. And, we're all in this together. And this is light versus dark. This is reason versus superstition.
Dogma, I guess,
we're all in this together. So,
yeah, we really are. I mean, look what's going on in Ukraine. Look what they have to do to fight for their democracy. Look what they've gone to. And we're so far not there, but we can't afford to even consider going there, and we need to keep up the fight. Well said, sir. America is an idea. I love that. Promo I did of that. Same theme in the next show. Folks, if you want to support Narrative, please do so. We really rely on everything, on you for everything. Really, literally everything. So please join us at patreon.com/narrative. It's about like $2.50 a show. It's like nothing if you support us for $10 a month, and it's worth it. You get a lot of free independent research that really helps you understand what's going on in the world, and maybe helps you analyze how things are developing in a more clear and cogent way than you would see on the mainstream media. So that's patreon.com/narrative. Thank you for all of you being here tonight. Have a good night, Eric.
Narrative is made possible by viewers like you. Join today and support truly independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative. That's patreon.com/narrative.